George.
Welcome to the Simple Minds podcast, where we look to empower and encourage real conversation amongst men everywhere by unpacking topics on self-help, philosophy, and business.
G'day everybody, this is the Simple Minds podcast. I'm Conrad Francis, and today I have Matt Hannam with me.
Hi.
Justin Bourne.
Sup?
Travis Haydo.
Yo.
And we're on the road today for our first travelling podcast recording. How cool's that?
The travelling Wilburys.
Somewhat.
That's where I thought
We've
you
got
were
a special
going.
guest, and this is pretty cool because this guy, I've known you for 10 years this year, this December. I connected with you on Facebook after reading your Magician's Way book, which transformed my life in a large way. So I've got to thank you for that publicly. You've written 2 other books since then, The Last Shaman and the latest one, Secrets of Natural Success, which are, you're all number one? They're all number ones?
Yeah.
Bestsellers?
Oh, absolutely.
They're sensational. Great reads. And if you haven't read them, we'll put them in the show notes, but they're all very good books. But yeah, I want to welcome William Whitecloud to the podcast. So thanks for making yourself available, mate.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to the Simple Minds.
The occasion is that you're running your Create Your Destiny workshop here in Melbourne, and I've done the workshop on your invitation a few years ago, which was an amazing piece of work. 5 days locked in and learning about alchemy and transformation and focus. And then I invited, these guys have been watching me go through probably a realignment within my own life and transforming my own life using some of the skills and tools that you give us, which again I've got to thank you for. And day 4, so these guys have got one more day to go. Mate, I guess for me, I know your story, but for the listeners, I mean, what brought you to actually putting the work together in such a format, and then wanting to deliver it in the way you do?
Well, I mean, the thing, how I came to this work, if you want to call it that, is through a long-term illness. Struggled with the illness, couldn't find any help in the world with the illness, and made me really sick, took me to my deathbed, literally. And right at the end, I met someone who wasn't a clinical professional or anything like that. They were just an ordinary Joe. And they amazed me by telling me they knew what was wrong with me. That wasn't so amazing, but that they had what I had, and that cured themselves. And at first I was, a bit dubious about it. But when they told me their story, I knew without a doubt they'd had what I had, because of how they described their experience, their symptoms, everything, and then I just knew. And so anyway, the guy told me that he could give me the cure.
What was the cure, mate? That's the interesting part.
Well, it is. It's very interesting. So he told me that the cure was, how he had cured himself was by eating red meat and drinking wine and smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, and that if I did that, I'd get better, And again, because he was the first person I could relate to in about 10 years, there was something about him that I believed, and also I didn't have anything to lose. I mean, I just received deathbed counselling, so just shortly before meeting him. And so I tried it out and just recovered, rapidly. And the thing about that whole experience is that, well, first of all, it was mind-blowing, was very profound, because if you've been sick to the point that over 10 years you've just steadily been dying, or reached the point that you're dying, it's kind of a tragic experience in your own life. And then to just heal so profoundly, has a profound effect on you. Well, it did on me, a really profound effect. I was just blown away. But the thing about it was that I didn't ever believe that, there's no part of me that ever believed that the efficacy was in the substances, in the meat, in the alcohol, in the caffeine, in the nicotine, right?
It wasn't bad though.
Huh?
It was enjoyable.
It was enjoyable, yeah. But the trouble with that is it was a limited ration of all of those things, right?
Yep.
So that was part of the key. But I never believed that there was any efficacy in those properties it dawned on me, and I had no prior experience of psychology or personal development or anything like that. I mean, nothing, So I had to make the realization for myself, and the realization that I made, there must be some way in which we, in which our focus creates our experience of life. Because I was just acutely aware of how intensely I didn't want to be sick, and how intensely I wanted to get better. And my life, my attention, my self-conscious was absolutely absorbed by wanting to be well and in fact, not sick. And I just got sicker and sicker and that. And then when I met this guy and he told me that, it's like I just gave up that kind of preoccupation,
Yep.
And I got better, and I just made this connection. And to this day, I even know that I might be wrong about that conclusion, but it's the conclusion I made, but I didn't know how it worked. So I wanted to find out how it worked. So I investigated, I searched. And you know what it's like when you make an intention, somehow that comes together. And then I discovered that there's a whole model around the idea that your focus creates your reality, you know. And I just got into it. And the thing is, you're saying, how come I organized it in the way that I did? There's another part of me also that wasn't just curious about how did this principle work, that your focus creates your reality, but I wanted to know everything about it. And out there in the world, even now, and as it was back there are a lot of information and ideas and whatever. And some of them have integrity and some of them don't. And for some reason, I just became obsessed in working it out and, sorting it out and working out fact from fiction and trying out everything and looking into everything and just reducing everything down to its working, practical essence. And I think you guys have already had at least some experience, and just in the last day, the last 4 days, you've done a lot more. But you can admit there's no fact to it or anything. There's no excessive anything that's not, practical and doesn't work and isn't true, So that's been a quest of mine is to just really refine it, structure it into, a really true working practical model.
Having done your work now, and obviously, like I said to you, I did it haphazardly, reading The Magician's Way and pulling out bits and pieces through there before we crossed paths in LA, and you invited me along. Would it be safe to say that a lot of us are too focused on the process as opposed to the end result? Is that what you've found the shift has been? Just staying in the end result longer?
Well, you see, that's kind of the problem, is that they basically form two orientations in life. In life, whether you're aware of it or not, you actually are either focused on the end result. Doesn't mean you exclude process. Doesn't mean that you don't do things and organize yourself and whatever. But it's just where you put the power. It's where the energy is, what you make important. And just normally, human beings, just by default, don't have naturally. Well, I think naturally we do, but through our conditioning, we just conditioned to believe and assume and adopt that how something gets done is what's important, rather than what we want to get done. And the trouble with this is that what the real problem with it is that when you're end result orientated, and that is more important than anything. As I said, of course, you involve processes and actions and all of that. But there's something about being end result orientated and end result focused, where that is like the most important consideration is what you want. it sets you up creatively, internally. It sets you up creatively, so that by being in that end result, that end result's an instruction to your subconscious of what needs to be created. And then your subconscious goes to work organizing, you see, functionally, what is the most effective way to get there. When you put the power in the process, and that's the how, in other words, when you ask yourself how instead of what engages your creative spirit, whereas how engages your identity, it engages your ego, and it engages your rational self. And your rational self isn't creative. It doesn't engage with the relevance and make connections and have insights and inspirations as to what is the most effective, powerful way for something to be achieved. It looks at your past experiences, at your biases, your patterns of pattern ways of doing things, you see, and then falls back on that. And the most insidious aspect of all of that is that really what happens with the process orientation, the how orientation, is your ego looks at, how you're going to get it. And as I said, it doesn't look at the relevance of the matter. What it actually does is it looks at what you believe is incomplete about yourself and identifies that as what you need to sort out before you go for what you're going for. So, it goes, the most important thing, the most important task in going for what you're going for is making yourself whole again, completing yourself. So like, for instance, a person with low worth will go, well, I want to achieve this end result, but I don't have enough worth. And it's all unconscious, by the way. I don't have enough worth I don't deserve this. I'm not good enough. So I need to be more worthy. So I've got to go and seek everybody's approval, and I've got to be a nice person, and then in the process of seeking approval and a nice person, and that the person then won't be in their own power.
Yep.
And sort of decisiveness and whatever dynamically takes care of the end result. They'll give that away and weaken themselves. Just as an example. So really, the preoccupation with the process and how something's going to get done over what's going to get done, believe it or not, funnily enough or not, and I think you guys can appreciate this, is that it weakens you. It weakens you, and it also blinds you and makes you less effective. Whereas, when you're end result orientated, as I say, you go into a dynamic, empowered, creative space that impresses on you, the most empowered, effective way to go for that. And I actually put it to you that it does even more than that, in my experience and observing a lot of people in 25 years. It also brings in things that you need, which doesn't happen when you're process orientated. You become all mechanical, and everything that happens is just done by what you mechanically do. But when you're end result orientated, things just seemingly come in to support you. The right people call you, the phone rings, whatever it is. There's a grace, there's a flow to it, and it goes beyond just what you do as a plod.
And the energy it releases is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing I can say. Like, people continually say to me, how do you achieve and do what I do? And I do a lot. And it's because that, and before I was doing your courses, I couldn't understand, I couldn't put a word around where I got my energy from, other than the fact that I believed in stuff, and I believed in the end result. I believed in what I was working towards, and that what gave me the motive to continue to do the work. And you're right, things open. Doors closed, but windows and other doors open. Phones rang, people showed up, solutions were provided, and it's crazy to think how powerful we are, but yet we give away our power so easily.
Yeah.
I haven't. So this podcast, William, we generally introduce a drink at the start, but again, I get.
Isn't this a drink?
I get a bit of a fangirl around you, so I forgot to do that. We're drinking a Melbourne beer called a Furphy. We have drunk it on the show before, but since we're in Melbourne, I thought we'd get a couple of brews. And you said you haven't drunk a beer for a while.
No, not for a long time.
Anyway, let's just cheers and then we'll continue.
Cheers. So I've had 2 sips and I'm pissed.
So, gentlemen, again, you've done up to day 4, which is day 5, in this create your destiny piece of work, and I think it's an amazing body of work that anyone that is interested in doing, and they should, and it's a great introduction to alchemy. We have a brekkie club and a mentor group in Perth, William, that we have all read another author's book called The Alchemist.
Hang on. Many of us have read The Magician's Way.
However, we have, I think all around tables we've read The Magician's Way here.
Yes.
I've spoken about your book plenty of times anyway, that's the most important piece. But
I'd like to call you the WA's evangelist for William.
Sure, cool, that's great. And hopefully...
that's fair.
And I have brought you guys, or encourage you guys to show up from a very selfish basis, and I think I've been very obvious with that, because I want to have more of these interesting alchemical and magical conversations. But gentlemen, 4 days in, you've got the guru on the hot seat. Any questions for him? Or you guys all shy?
No, look, I'm not shy at all. I mean, maybe start with more of a statement, and just something that's really jumped at me today is just that the realisation that so many of the skills that we're using to make around our emotions and our decision making in life is literally when we formed those skills when we were an infant to 2, 3, 4, and you can look back and just shake your head thinking that, wow, we've not updated those, and how did we get this far?
By mistake.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's really interesting you say that, because I obviously coach a lot of people in the corporate world, corporate clients, and I haven't worked in the corporate scene for a long time, but I live it vicariously through my clients, and in these larger institutions especially, but I don't think it's different anywhere else, there's this tendency for this level of toxicity, because there are objectives that everyone's trying to achieve, right? I mean, otherwise they wouldn't be there, right? So they're trying to achieve objectives, whatever they are, depending on the nature of the business, the corporation, the government body, whatever it is, And what I see through my clients is their challenge of operating in that environment where there's just so much, or let me put it this way, where there's so little cohesion in the approach towards those end results, just because of the human dynamics and factors at play, where, like what you said, Matt, is that you're just surprised at how much the strategies we're living out today and operating from were developed by 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, and I mean, just look at a session of Parliament. It's not adults, it's play school, it's preschool stuff going on there, and it's just everyone believing, operating in a way of how they believe they need to operate, and what they believe they need to achieve to get there. I mean, they typically, especially people in high places, got there through being powerful and assertive and all that, and they kind of have on steroids the idea, well, I've got to be right, and then there's these conflicting ideas of, who's right and who's going to win, and the power struggles and all of that, and so, that's what I'm saying. My clients have this challenge of operating in an environment where energy is wasted, instead of it just being a cohesive combining towards an end result and, coming to the most effective approach. There's just like this competition for energy.
Yeah.
It's just like everyone's kind of competing against each other. And it's kind of like it's going, they're just all going back to their families when they were kids, and, in the way that it was back then, and how they got energy and how you had to be and how you got your way and all of that. And it's a terribly uncreative way to go. And then when you get a team of people who agreed on what the objective is and that the end result is, and that the end result is not the same as the way you're going to get there, but you're dedicated to the end result and you surrendered to getting, the best way there,
yep.
right? And everyone's just serving that. And in that, like, really, people are, one way of saying that is people are putting aside their egos. And in that environment, then this magic and alchemy comes into play that we're talking about.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I distinctly remember being given your book, and like I said, it was in 2009, April, my father passed away, my girlfriend left me, and I was in Shit Street, and then a concrete truck blew up right next to my house, and it nearly killed me, but it certainly destroyed the front of my house. And I got to a point where I said to a really good friend of mine that enough is enough. This shit can't keep happening to me. And I was given your book. And then my life got a little bit worse because the business I had unravelled itself, and I liquidated it. And then my daughter decided to live with her mum and not speak to her dad. I think I was speaking to you through that time frame as well. But the other two things, the last two things, I'd already comprehended to the fact that things were happening for me. So I had to figure out, or at least allow myself to move towards what I wanted to create. And I remember, and I've told these guys a lot, that at 16 I had a conversation where I mapped out my life until 50 years of age, and I'm 47 now, and at 37, 38 years of age, I had nothing. I pretty much wiped myself out. And went about believing in myself again, and coming back to that 16-year-old conversation. And the only thing I didn't achieve, because I achieved everything else I didn't even really know, was that I wanted to be retired by the age of 50, and I'm 47, and that's a distinct possibility right now. And it's crazy how this has happened. But you talk about structural tension in your teaching, you talk about end results, you talk about current reality and your limiting beliefs. Another person doing the course was talking to me about, how did you know that you were keeping tension? I said, I didn't know that. I didn't know that, but I just didn't give up. And I continued to believe. And so when we were going through the work in January last year, and I'm thinking to myself, hang on a sec, yep, well, that works, and that's what that situation was, and that works, and that's what that situation was. It's crazy, but it just all makes sense.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that there's a bunch of things you did right, you didn't know how you were doing them right, but then doing this...
When you overlay the structure...
you overlay the structure, you see, that's what I did right.
Yeah, it was crazy, and that's, I think that's what we
Affirmation.
forget. Tick. I was validating the work. Because I think it's simple, but it's complex. I mean, because of the shifting of the beliefs. And you guys are going through it. So what are you finding?
Me?
Yeah.
Justin. So, look, there's a huge amount of validation in the last few days. I mean, I've been, I guess you could say, passively exposed to alchemy through Conrad over the last, while now, 18 months. Look, I don't even know where to start because my brain's a bit of a mush in the last 4 days and still kind of take it all in. But I think it's just fascinating, and I think I said this today in a share, like, William, what you've done around simplifying a lot. Like, I've been to I haven't done like Tony Robbins' Date with Destiny or anything like that, but I've experienced that. I listened to like a lot of Gary Vee, a lot of the kind of like, I guess you could say, modern day philosophers now that are getting a lot of airtime and whatnot, and exposed to a few business courses. And this has probably been the most concise, laid out, taking people through the journey and taking them through their shit that I've ever experienced. And you mentioned it well, there is no fat. And I think what I'm fascinated by is like how, this is probably then a question. There are a lot of people out there spruiking a lot of stuff, and you talked about obviously through your journey trying to sift through the fact and the fiction. There seems to be obviously a massive trend around self-awareness and mindfulness and meditation. There also seems to be a massive rise around entitlement and a lack of perseverance. How can what you've learnt, well, I guess the first question is like, what are your thoughts on that?
Right. I think from what I'm hearing you say is that what's been impressed on you since you've been here the 4 days is
There's a lot of bullshit out there.
Yeah, well, that's right. The comprehensive nature of the model I've got, and the completeness of it, you see, and by the way, I don't take credit for it. It's not my model. This model was evolved thousands of years ago, right? And you see, there might not be a lot of bullshit out there. There is some, or a lot, but that what people have got is not, I'm just saying, is not necessarily bullshit. The trouble is it's incomplete, right? We won't mention names, but stuff that is orientated around being driven and rah, and high levels of motivation and all of that. They just got a piece of it, you see, which is kind of the end of a process where you take action. And so they got the action elements of it, right? But they got none of the preceding elements of it. Whereas alchemy is and this took me a long time to put together because it's not out there in its wholeness. Otherwise, I'd have just adopted someone else's model and just gone, thanks, But I had to put it together.
A lot of people do and recycle quite a lot. A lot of the business coach and life coaches and all out there these days as well.
Right, but my model, you see, is as I say, as based on alchemy, and it's a complete model, and that's the thing. I had to do a lot of searching and refining and trial and error to find out what the sort of complete model is, and it is. It's a complete, comprehensive model for creating. You see. And from inception through assimilation all the way through to completion, and there are phases in all of that, and so that's my point. You see, is that very few people have the whole model, and they don't even know that there's a model. They've just taken on, as you say, from others. They've taken on a chunk of it, and then push that, but it's not a complete model, right? So like for instance, you see let's just say the meditation aspects of it, and you can get someone who just teaches the being. You must just be the power of now and just be here and just be present. All that. It's very good, but it's not. It's just a piece of the model. It's what arises out of the now. And then how you progress that, because we are creative beings. People don't realize that. That all over the world, people adopt the yin and yang. That yin and yang thing. What does that mean? It's profound what it means, but nobody knows what it means. They just put it on their door, on their business card, or whatever.
Tattoo on their bodies.
Tattoo on their body, exactly. They don't know what it means. What it means, I'm going to tell you what it means. It means that we are creative beings. That's what we are. We're creators. That's what it means, because it's a symbol of a combination of masculine and feminine, gender, and that has a creative meaning. It has no other meaning. You tell me, go and find out what it means. That's what it means. It's not for fun. It means that there's a feminine side to us and a masculine side, a passive side to us and an active side, if you will. It's deeper and more complex than that, but just in short. But what that means is we're creators and we exist to create. That's our sole purpose. It's our purpose for being alive. And with that comes an inbuilt process that when you understand, you can go along with it and apply it. And that's a problem. People don't understand it, and then they just have chunks of it and they push it on you. There's the just be, and then there's the work like hell. And the just be don't have work like hell, and the work like hell don't
work like hell.
Huh?
It's counterproductive, counterintuitive.
Yeah, so anyway, what I've unearthed and uncovered, because as I say, in my latest book, The Secrets of Natural Success, I take no credit for it, but what I do take credit for is bloody is bloody unearthing it. I can't even take credit for that, huh? but I take credit for unearthing it, and filtering it out and sifting it through and putting it together. I'm like someone who was given a house, found a Ferrari in their garage in pieces, in parts, don't know anything about mechanics, but then over time, through trial and error, put it together and now drive it,
I can attest to that, because when you sit through some of these, you guys sat through 4 days, having sat through a fair whack of all your content, like four courses, plus reading and listening to his stuff on the internet for God knows how many years, 10 years now. Try and research some of this stuff. It's hard to find.
Yeah.
It's hard to find, and that's what makes it even better when you get access to it. The quote, and these guys know it really, really well. The half-wise get thrashed against rocks by reason of their own folly. Yeah. I remember this from January last year, and it's resonated with me like you would not believe. But try finding that goddamn quote is almost near impossible. I've never found it anywhere.
You'll find it in The Secrets of Natural Success.
I screenshotted it while I was reading it. Conrad. It's a quote we've sat on for a while. It's kind of like...
But it just makes sense.
You get awareness to some of this power, and if you don't do anything with it just fucks with you. And we've been sitting in that. A lot of people sit in that, I think.
They acquire the knowledge and take no action.
Mm. But I just want to say something about that is, and we're going back to, because the conversation I think sort of started around the end result versus the, and I have to say I've done I think I've done myself proud in putting this model together, and excuse me, but the thing about it is how I did it. Was I intended it. I was in the end result. From very early, I went, that's what I want to do. And so then the model found me, I promise you. That's what I was saying.
Yep.
It's not just all I've done, because part of the model I found in cave walls in Africa, and I'm not lying to you. I really mean that. Yeah, I did. And, a really big chunk of what I know, I was in a bookstore, like a weird bookstore in Cape Town in South Africa, and the owner of the bookstore, I was minding my own business and he was minding his own business, but after a while he just came up to me and he said, you should have this book. I think you should have this book. Yeah, I hadn't spoken to him or anything. I'm telling you, a lot of what's, maybe it's not everything, like I know, but it either gave me new information, or that the book that he gave me, or clarified a lot, And I mean, what if I hadn't been in that bookshop? Yeah. And what if the guy hadn't just said, you know what, I think this book's for you, right?
So coincidence, do you use that word a lot?
Not really. I prefer synchronicity, Yeah. I mean, because coincidence is random, I think, whereas synchronicity is
divine.
It's divine. It makes a connection between things that has sort of some kind of meaning.
What would you say to, and I know you do this on day one of your course, I think it's brilliant. I mean, what do you say to the people which in your course you start with the set A, who think that some of this stuff is woo-woo and like don't believe in spirits, and I mean, then there's the other side of the coin, the law of the attraction. So what do you say to people when they bring up like, oh yeah, you can use these stories to justify that, and they don't believe, I guess, a non-believer?
Right. Well, I don't worry too much about the non-believers, to be honest. It's like I'm not trying to justify anything, but I don't tell that story to prove anything. I'm just, we're just having a chat here. I'm very happy for people to be skeptical, and I think skepticism partly, some healthy skepticism. There's unhealthy skepticism for sure, but healthy skepticism is a good thing, right? I mean, imagine if we didn't discriminate about anything. It would be terrible, I think. It would be disastrous. So some discrimination and discernment's important. And it doesn't bother me, honestly. I ran a workshop in the Blue Mountains a long time ago when I was much less experienced than this.
Less grey?
Huh?
Less grey?
Less white, you mean? You know what? I don't think I had a grey hair back then. So that's how long ago it was, right? Seriously. You know how I went grey? Not white.
You had a
grey.
daughter.
No, I had pericarditis. And I was really sick with this thing, pericarditis. And I had really long hair, I had shoulder length hair. And it was, I can show you a photo of it, or maybe you've seen that photo of me and Christian with me with long hair, right? And sort of like a honey nut coloured hair. And I got pericarditis, and it nearly killed me. And at the end of it, my hair rotted, so I had to shave it off. And then it was like sort of brownish, gold, honey coloured hair, beautiful, because you can hear from the description. And I shaved it off, because it was all rotten, right? And it grew back grey. I was like, what? But I was in the Blue Mountains, not Grey Mountains, the Blue Mountains, above Sydney there, and I was like, I've been doing this for 25 years, but then I'd been doing it about 2 years, and I used to do some work in the banks, and this guy came up to me who was a research manager of one of the big 4 banks. Like he was the director of research, so he was a board member of the bank, and he was there at the workshop. Nice guy. And he came up to me and he said, halfway through the workshop, he said, "You're winning, William." I was like, what? Because he was participating in everything. I was like, what? He says, "Well, this goes against my grain." And I was like, well, I didn't know that, I thought you came here because you wanted to attend and all that. So anyway, I went over to his friend who had kind of introduced me and thing, and I said, I just had this weird conversation with this guy. He's like, said I was winning and this and that, and said, well, don't you know he's the head of the Skeptic Society in Australia?
Oh my God.
And I mean, I'm glad I found that out then, because if I knew that, like one of those things they say, the head of the Skeptic Society is coming, and he has a degree in physics, and he's the head of the research at one of the biggest banks in Australia. Then I'd have cancelled the workshop.
Trev, here we go.
Hey, settle down. William, I'm going to come straight out with it. You scare the shit out of me. and because
You could have opened with that, mate.
Yeah, because no matter what bullshit you can throw up, you can dissect it and see right through it. And that's one thing that I've really enjoyed over the last 4 days, that it's given you the ability to pull back the layers and go really deep within yourself and understand who you are and how you can be a better person or a better person to yourself. The one thing that I've enjoyed learning about and listening to is ego, because there's so much out there on ego, and a lot of people define it as a bad thing and it's really
of course,
thing.
Yeah.
What's your take on ego and how you use it?
Yeah, thanks, Travis. I know everyone's name now. You know what I mean? It's like, it is your name, isn't it? Yeah, I thought that's right. You terrify me. You always get my name wrong. The ego gets a really bad rap. It's kind of like people, and it's perpetuated by the half-wise, because there's a lot of half-wise. This is what we've been discussing here. People don't know everything, and largely, I'm sure you'd agree with me, because there's just this common idea of the ego, really, that's just assumed generally, is that the ego is like this sort of wicked part of ourselves, that's self-centered, willful, selfish.
I name mine Conrad.
I do too.
I call him Kanye.
I call my ego Conrad. In fact, sometimes I call it Francis when I'm cross with it.
You don't know how much that'll resonate for the
Conrad Francis. I said my ego, and then it knows it's in trouble. No, but it's this idea of the ego that's like it's bad, self-centered, selfish. Actually evil. It's a part of us that desires bad things, that will do bad things. If I do something bad, it's almost a cop-out. Well, that was my ego. That wasn't me, But it's not understood, that your ego really is, and this is a premise. You don't have to believe it, but it's just a way of seeing it. Is that, going back to the yin and yang symbol, that relates to who we are essentially, and we are who we are essentially. So we're not our beliefs. We believe things, but we are not our beliefs. They're quite distinct from me. But we are not most things. We are our essence, and our essence occupies a vehicle, which is our bodies, our minds, our emotional bodies. We've got energetic bodies. All of that. So your ego is the vehicle that your essence occupies. Your ego is what is of you that won't last. Right? Your mind will die, your body will die, your emotions will die, your etheric body will die. And so that's what it is, and therefore it's a container. So you can't hate your container. There's nothing wrong with your container. It's what gets you through life. And also, as part of that, it's the vehicle of your orientation. It's the part of you that orientates you, that understands how the world is, and therefore kind of guides you through life, as it were. So that's what the ego is. The sort of, I would say, unuseful, because I wouldn't say the evil side or the negative side, anything. It's just the unuseful side of it, is that how the ego achieves that, how it orientates you, is it establishes an idea about how things are, because that's what orientation is like. If you do orienteering in Scouts, I don't know if any of you ever did that, I did, but you learn to know where you are and where you're going and how you can get there, right? And to do that, you have to know where you are and what's what and how a compass works and, whatever. So the limitation of the ego is that its first task is to establish how it is here. And it does that. But then it just sets that in stone for the rest of your life. And it goes, well, this is how it is. This is how you operate in life. These are the dangers. This is how you avoid the dangers. This is how you get what you want, and all of that, And this just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Was it you, Matt, who raised it and say, wow, it's amazing that we are fulfilling strategies that we developed when we were infants. Mm-hmm. And that's why. They're the ego strategies, and so that's okay, if you understand the full picture, because you're not just your ego. Your ego is here to sort of kind of give you that kind of orientation. It's also creates an individual sense of self and existence, right? But you have a creative side to yourself, you know. So the ego serves a purpose as being your vehicle here, but you're not meant to live out of your ego. You're meant to, it's like the obvious analogy. You have a car, right? And it's meant to get you places, but you're not meant to live in your car. You're not meant to sleep in it and have sex in it and shower in it and, you know, whatever, right? It's just your car. You get out of it and you do stuff, right? And so that's like us. We have an ego, but we're not meant to live out of it. We're meant to get out of it and into our creative nature, a more whole nature, and live out of that. So, you know, you guys know me. I'm a sort of rock fan. You see me in my rock T-shirts and all that. And it's we quote Led Zeppelin a lot, don't we? But you know, there was a really interesting album in the early '90s. By a band called Guns N' Roses. Really big hit, and it had a very interesting title, which was "Use Your Illusion." You know, your ego is an illusion. It's a vehicle, but it's an illusion. But you use it to be here, but you don't live out of it. You be here with it, but then you use it. You create something outside of it, you know, and that's what it's all about, in my opinion.
William, the concept of tension is something that's really come to me over the last 4 days, and it's not something I've really heard before, and it makes a lot of sense when I think about that younger version of myself that created these strategies. I realise that I seek to resolve tension very quickly in you know, any conversations with family, team members. I seek to resolve the tension, but there's creativity is found through those processes. I thought maybe you might be able to tell us a little story to illustrate that. You've had some great stories, and I'd love for the listeners to hear something.
Have I got a story? Which one do you have in mind?
You've got look, you back to back them. I mean, you've got many. Whatever comes to you.
About tension.
Well, the concept of tension I really enjoyed. There's one was the example, I think, which is in Secrets of Natural Success, which is a business-related example.
Yeah.
Where you had I think it was a friend that created some tension there, but I don't mind. Your storytelling is great. So I'd love to share that.
I think I've had half a beer now, and I'm just like really.
He's opening his legs. sorry, he's mine.
I'm losing my mind. I haven't had a. No, actually, but I mean, anyway, let's just talk about tension for a start. You know, is that I think that we are subject to some misconceptions in life. They're societally held misconceptions, and they're very detrimental to us. You know, the ideas about life and how life works and how we should be in life that are actually fundamentally wrong. You know, and holding those misconceptions is a real limitation. You know, the analogy I use is that if you can swim, you know how to swim, but you guys are Aussies here, so you know what it's like to be caught in a rip, right? You can't swim against a rip, certainly not a strong one. Yeah. You know what I mean? You can swim, but you're going nowhere, right? And so you're paddling and whatever, and you're just exhausting yourself. And it's like that with these misconceptions I can think of. And, you know, one of the most fundamental misconceptions, there are a few doozies, you know, but one of the doozies is that tension is bad. That tension is bad, and that it should be eliminated. And it's where a lot of models that seek peace and harmony and meditation, not having anything against meditation or even yoga, say, but doing those for the sake of resolving the tension, which is different than stress. Stress is another issue, but tension's a creative force, right? You know, as I've explained to you guys, everything in the universe that ever got created was as a product of tension-seeking resolution, you know. And so anything that was ever created is a product of tension-seeking resolution. So when you create, you want tension. People who have understood this, composers, have created tension to compose. Whether they know it or not, inventors are under tensions. How they come up with their inventions and their discoveries is because they're subject to tension, the tension of solutions they seek to the problem. So they have problems on one hand and solutions that they seek on another.
Talk to us about the magazine story.
The magazine story?
The corporate magazine, the business with the magazine.
The same story.
It's the same story, yeah. Okay. You just want me to get to the point, do you?
No, I think it's a great story to pull it all together.
Mm. Yeah, no, okay. So, but anyway, you need tension, right? And so, anyway, I'll get to the point. Okay. Why didn't you say stop waffling?
I've never seen him do that to anyone before.
Jesus.
Fuck off, William.
And so he's really scared of you, but that's the strongest he's ever done it again.
He was hanging with the tension there. He was hanging with the tension.
No, I was, you see, and he was the solution that came to me. You see, that's how it works, right? You see, that's how it works. This is how it happens. Yeah, well, I mean, anyway, that's a really good story, isn't it? It's. So I had a mate, and well, he's still a mate, right? But he had on a given day had 3 different people independently contact him for work, and he didn't have any work for them. He didn't know of any work, and he said he'd get back to them if he knew. But at the end of the day, he thought about it. He thought, because he's trained in this work, right? He'd done my trainings, and he thought that wasn't a coincidence. He had a feeling this was synchronicity. So I invited them all to his office the next day, and they all came, and by the way, with a promise of work. He said, I've got something for you. I've got a business. And so they expected there to arrive there independently, see him independently, and there'd be something for them. And then they found themselves in the room with other guys. And so he said, listen, guys, I've got an idea. We're going to create a business together. And they were very excited. And they said, what's the business? And he said, I don't know. He said, it's going to come to us, you see. And they had no sense of this idea of having an end result, holding the tension of that end result, and then, going along with what arises out of that tension. And, they just thought it was a crazy idea and all that. But anyway, in the end, he persuaded them and says, look, we're going to create this. We're going to set ourselves a target of 1 month, and something's going to come to us that's going to suit all of our talents and abilities, and we'll get on board that and we'll make a success of it. We'll find it, but it'll come to us. And I'll pay you guys for a year. I'll give you a year's salary each, as a loan and all that. So anyway, okay. On that basis, we'll join in. So that's what they agreed to. And he was trained, and so he's there just hanging out with attention, waiting for something to come. And these other 3 guys, they're untrained and experiencing a lot of tension, because they're in the process that we were talking about. How's this going to happen? It can't just happen. And so they then out there looking, forcing it to work, looking at insolvency notices if there's a business there, finding out that there's a Macca's franchise going, and they're bringing all these things every day. And I was explaining, the walls in the office around full of charts and flow charts and, business plans and everything. And nobody's happy with this, and they're freaking out, and they keep saying to him, well, how are we going to get this? And he says, I don't know. He just keeps saying, I don't know, but, we've given ourselves a month, and by the end of it, it's going to appear, or it's not. And so he's hanging with the tension, and they're freaking out and running around looking for things, all very unsuitable, and everything they bring, everything that each person brings to the table is rejected by the others. And so anyway, right at the end, second last day of their deadline, one of the guys comes to him and says, listen, I've had enough. I've got to have some work. Do you know anyone who's got some work for me? He says, no, I don't, but go and see this other guy that I know down the road. He's a publisher and he may know. He might not have work for you, but he may know. So the guy says, okay, I'm going to go over there. And he goes straight down to the other guy's office. And at the end of the day, he comes back and he's just collecting his stuff. And my mate says to him, did he have anything for you? He says, no, he didn't. But he wants to see you. He said, can you go and see him? So on the last day of the deadline, my mate goes to see him. First thing in the morning, before he even goes to work, and he walks through the other guy's door. And as he walks through the door, the guy says, have you got $2 in your pocket? He says, yeah, why? Do you want me to go and get coffees for us? Because in the days when you could get a coffee for $2, right? And the guy says, no. He says, I've got 2 publications for you. You can have them for $2 if you give me 50% of the profits that you make once you make a go of them. And so then my mate just went, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. And he didn't even run the numbers. He didn't do anything. He just looked at the guy and says, no, you know what we'll do? I'll give you $2 and I'll give you 6.5% of this company we've formed with the other guys. You can have 6.5% of that whole company and $2. And he gave him $2 there and then. And, they took these 2 publications, which were a cruise line magazine and an in-flight airline magazine, and they immediately turned them into successes, turned them from quarterlies into monthlies, took on other airline publications, and soon had other businesses added on, and soon had a really pumping business, that not only turned into a really pumping business, but then it allowed each of those 4 people to take on interests of their own that suited their own interests and abilities in that. And they just did so well. I mean, one of the companies they created also for no cost, because it was just a spin-off of the labor they already had, the office space that they already had. They did expand it, but it cost nothing to set up. And just coincidentally, another friend of mine was the managing director of that company in the end. And they just sold it a couple of years ago for $70 million. That's just one of the spin-offs of those $2, right?
Attention.
Huh?
Hanging out with tension.
Hanging out with tension, And there's a lot, to that story. And when I sent my mate the story for him to review, to get his permission to put it in the book, he agreed to it, but he said, but you've missed out the main point of that story, William, which was the hanging out with the tension.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm very mindful of your time, boss. And I'm very grateful for your time. Gentlemen, just in winding up, any quick acknowledgements, anything you want to throw at him?
I want to steal a Tom Bilyeu quote, Impact Theory. What impact do you want to have on the world?
What impact on... I've already, it's an interesting question, and I say this in all modesty. I feel like I've already had it, and it will continue. But that's exactly what the impact I wanted to and want to have on the world, is I want to get alchemy out in its modern context, in its practical context out in the world, And so I just feel like my legacy, in a sense, it's not like I'm going to roll over and die now, but I feel like in a sense that's complete now. I have 3 books that fully summarize my model, and I have a very intact training that other people, either in part or in whole, already use around the world, and you'd be amazed at how many people have taken on my work and taken on the people that who have taken on my work, how many people have taken on their work, how it's like really spreading around the world, big time. I mean, in a lot of different ways. And there's talking about Gary Vee. I've got a mate who I trained who's now sharing stages with Gary Vee and doing it on that level, and it's out there. So that's what I wanted to create, and I've done it, you know. And then that's, as I say, that's not to say, you know, I'm going into retirement now or something. I don't want to do that. I want to stay there and keep the energy pumping out. But I'm definitely satisfied that I've put it together. Yeah.
Well, these three gentlemen, I've been working with them, known them. They've all been experiencing the work in its disguised form for a while. It's going to become very obvious going forward how we
Is this
speak.
Conrad or Batman? Because he likes to see himself as Batman.
So the work is getting out there. William, I've got to thank you for holding the tension and creating the body of work you have, the patience it would have taken to deal with the frustrations and the trials and tribulations as to any creative being would go through.
Yeah.
Where's the best place to stay connected to you, mate? If people were going to follow you, figure out where your next course is it social media? Is it your website? Where do you want them to go to?
Well, yeah, my website, not Secrets of Natural Success, naturalsuccessacademy.com, you know, is the best point.
And you're on all socials, you're on Facebook?
Well, Facebook and Insta, not Twitter.
William Whitecloud, that's the man.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
Thanks, brother.
Appreciate
and brothers. Thanks.
you.
Thanks, William.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.